Good morning and good afternoon to you wherever you may be as you tune in today. And thank you for joining us. For those who have joined us for the first time, these conversations are focused on HR and workplace topics with a lens of talent management, workplace culture, DEI, and learning and development. I'm Sonya Sepahban, CEO of OurOffice, where we help busy HR professionals and people leaders navigate the current environment and be the most effective at what they do with a suite of time-saving products and services. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Sandy Harvey, President and Chief Inclusion Strategist at Exodus Consulting Group, and my good friend. So welcome, Sandy. Such a pleasure to have you join us again.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Before we get into the conversation, I want to mention that this session is approved for SHRM recertification credits, and the activity code is shared later in the session. So please stay tuned for that. So Sandy, it's great to have you. And, I just want to begin by thanking you for being here in your busy day that I know you have. And I'm sure our audience would love to get to know you better first. So can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, um, especially any specific experiences, personal or professional that have brought you to this moment in your life and in your career and what you're focusing on now. So we can just get updated on what you're doing these days.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I am a diversity, and I'm saying it out loud, a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist. I come to this work from lived experience, from Fort Worth, Texas, and where I had diverse interactions as a child. I started playing soccer at the age of 4. I was the only person of color for 13 years and did not know that this was the beginning of my journey on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then also realized, having been in private schools and different lived experiences, that all are not created equal, and that we have to be intentional about inviting and welcoming others into the space. My background, I started in HR through training and development. So even in my career, my background is in banking. And I've worked as a consultant in a lot of different industries, defense, also working in nonprofit. And so just have been supremely blessed to work in a lot of different spaces.
That's awesome. I know we met, I was in aerospace and defense, and that's how we met. And, what I did not know is that you started playing soccer at 4. That's kind of,
Mhm.
that's really awesome.
Well, it was the pediatrician. I had severe asthma, and the pediatrician told my mom to put me in a sports activity where I could build my lungs, which that's why I started playing soccer, and I loved it. I played for 17 years in my lifetime.
Wow, that's awesome. And there's a lot of running across a very big field,
Yeah.
recall in soccer. So that I can see why they recommended that. Well, the title of our conversation today is Executive Disorder, what DEI mandates mean for you. And we'll talk more about why we were being cute there with calling it disorder instead of executive orders. But let's first briefly discuss the two key mandates, right? They are Executive Order 14151, which is the title is Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. It was issued on January 20th, shortly after inauguration. There is another executive order which was issued the next day. It's Order 14173, which the title is Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. As a leader with over 25 years of experience in HR, can you share your takeaways when you just read these executive orders? What do you think?
Yes. So I will first state that I am not a licensed attorney, right?
Yes, of course.
So this is Sandy's interpretation, which reading both of these and even listening to the titles, language matters. That's the first thing that I'll say is, ending illegal discrimination implies that there's illegal discrimination going on. When we say, talk about ending radical and wasteful government DEI programming and preferences, is it wasteful? Who says it's radical? So it's really just making sure that, the understanding is that something was done related to diversity, equity, and inclusion that kept others from being involved in this process. So whether it's at an organization in the government, it's really saying we're going to stop these programs because all people, it's exclusive, not inclusive. And those are really, to me, I think where this is still kind of fluid to me, with a lot of uncertainty about where we will end up and land. But I have to say that I am definitely a proponent of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and bringing all people into spaces where all have access for success. And I don't know that these executive orders support my line of thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really great point, right? That the way the titles are, worded, they presuppose or imply
Mm-hmm.
that there is such stuff going on. Now, we called this title disorder because the way it's worded, one of the reasons is what you mentioned. Also, as you read it, right, it's a little bit. I found myself when I first read it, and I've read them both several times. I found myself a little bit off kilter because I had heard about it first. We all first hear about these things and the interpretation of people opining about it, and then reading the actual wording. It's saying something that's obvious. It's like anything else that can be used for, not as intended and for nefarious intent, versus as intended, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
law, I mean, many things can be misused. So it's written as though it's almost like you can't object to the actual wording of the orders themselves. They sort of say, don't do illegal things, which we would
Right.
all readily agree with. Um, Now, so we call it disorder because they've stirred quite a bit of confusion, because of this wording, right? And it's also evidenced by the widely different positions that some very known brands and large corporations have taken in reacting to that, right? Because people don't know how to react to these things. So, so just to show a few, right? I mean, I'm going to show just the slide real quick here. We don't show too many slides, and for those enjoying it on audio by our podcast, I'll try and read these a little bit. But in this case, we just thought it was really instructional to include a couple of slides for those who are watching this in video format. So these are the brand positions on DEI. People who have withdrawn publicly and externally voiced that they are stopping or decreasing their efforts include companies like Ford, Walmart, Target, Amazon, Meta, Lowe's, McDonald's, and others. And then equally, what we don't hear as much sometimes is on the right-hand side of this slide, there are those who have vocally and in the name, typically by their CEO, have actually come out quite in support and said that they plan to continue their support of DEI efforts, and for reasons, as we heard from JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, he said this is commercial, this is about profit, and we find that we do better with these efforts. Those include also companies like Costco and Apple that fought their some activists, actually. Their boards actually came out strongly and defeated some activist proposals. The ELF brand for cosmetics, they're great. They've actually been very supportive for a long time. They ran that famous ad, so many dicks, and they by that they meant there are more men named Dick on boards, and there's nothing wrong with that. But here's the punchline is that there's more men with the name Dick than there are women with any name on boards of major companies. And so and then there's other companies like Deutsche Bank and Cisco, Delta, Salesforce, of course, that's always been supportive. So a number of companies on the other side of this. We also conducted our own surveys in the last recent times since January. And I'm showing this here. Again, I'll share this for those on audio. We ran two LinkedIn surveys, and one of them was, the first one was asking what has been your personal experience with diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of impacts on your career. Has it opened doors for you? Has it created barriers for you? Or has it just not affected you, right? And we had in both cases, a number of responses, and there were, statistically significant numbers. So the ones that said that it had opened doors for them, that DEI was good for them, was in the majority. It was 52%. Many people, the next largest section was about a third of the people said it hasn't affected their career. And there's about 17% that said it has that DEI has created barriers for them. We actually followed up. We have a research arm that does this, and we followed up with everyone who said it had created barriers for them to see what the situation was. And only 2 people responded, despite our several attempts. And that doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, I'm sure there was good stories there. People just are busy and not everybody responds on LinkedIn. But the 2 that we did get, one was a gentleman who said that it just wasted his time. He didn't need the DEI training and this sort of thing. And to that, I thought, well, I go through TSA when I go to the airport. I'm not a terrorist, so that wastes my time when I have to go through that and take my shoes off and all that stuff. But I understand why it's there, right? So I was hoping that would be the case with this gentleman as well. And then there was one lady who shared a situation she went through, and upon talking with her, it actually was an improper implementation of DEI that ended up hurting her career. And that is true, and it does happen. Like everything else, it happens, right? I mean, banking system, for God's sake, our bank went out of business. Silicon Valley Bank went out of business completely, and we were left with not knowing for a few days what was going on with our money. But nobody said, let's get rid of all banking. People understood that a few banks overextended themselves, and there was an issue with that needed to be fixed. So I interpret this, and obviously I'm going to stop here in a moment after I share this slide, and I want to hear how you think of this, Sandy, and how do you see different people, different industries, different companies, reacting. This is just some data. And so I think that this, just sort of is a good indication that, yes, there have been improper implementations of DEI. I think we should all acknowledge that and honor people's various experiences and do our best to keep improving and continuously, strive to be better. The second, one that we launched and ran on LinkedIn was, what is your organization planning to do regarding DEI? And here we can see that, some people said they were going to increase or start DEI efforts. This number actually has gone up a little bit since we published this in this format. It's actually a little bit higher, around 10-12% said that they would increase their efforts, because this is a more recent survey that's still ongoing. And then Then the next one that they would decrease was about 16%. And a majority, about 3/4, said they would not plan to make any changes. To be sure, not make any changes could be that they didn't have anything going on and they're going to keep it that way, right? Or they did have some things going on, and again, no change to that. So with this set of data, I've thrown a bunch of things at you, but we thought this might be interesting to share with everybody at this moment in time. So, what are your thoughts as you see this different experiences, different reactions to the orders? How do you interpret that, and how do you kind of make sense of all of it?
Um, so if we look at it, I try to look at it from a contextual standpoint. Those that I work with, clients that I have, are still continuing the culture work that they're doing. They understand that doing this work is important because you want to retain and you want to engage your team members. So looking at it from a holistic standpoint, I think I'd like to believe we're beyond the business case for diversity, but some still want to know, well, why is this important? Well, profitability is huge. Innovation is there of why we're doing this work. And so even looking at the statistics that you provided, it's, from individual standpoint, most people benefited from having a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. There are some that probably benefited but have no idea that they did. Whether it's recruiting efforts or focused internal recruiting efforts or intentional succession planning processes or leadership development or mentoring programs. People benefited but may not associate it necessarily with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's one piece of it. The other, from the standpoint of companies, and I like the fact that you put logos there because it makes it real. It's like, these are the places where we shop, we eat, we do something, we're connected to it. And so, understanding who's still focused on the work and who's not, my sentiment has been in many cases that if it's important work to start, it's important to continue. And it there's some tweaks that happen, but those that are continuing to do the work are at the point now where it's not, they have the measurements and they have the statistics and they know that they're doing something that works for their organization. I'm also, we don't know when organizations or companies started based on the statistics, based on the survey, but I know that there are many organizations that started after the murder of George Floyd. That's when they started their DEI efforts. And so maybe their context around doing this work is around focused on Blacks or focused on, men. It could be singular focused work, but it's also thinking about broader than that is how can we look at DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion with the lens of we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. And I will say that because those that I've seen that I know who pulled back even slightly also may have an increase in investigations that are taking place in their workplace. So maybe you're pulling funds from here saying, oh, we're not going to be focused on this, we're not going to be dedicated to it, but you are spending time and effort, and you're probably spending more time and effort on investigations, on writing people up, on performance plans and all of those things, which takes time, and leaders have to be involved in that. HR has to be involved in that. And there could be lawsuits that come from that, or EEO complaints. So there are other things that you may feel it in a different way when you start pulling back.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said about some people have no idea that they've benefited, right? Because there's actually data out there that I'm sure you have seen, Sandy, and many of our listeners have too, is that when companies have DEI efforts, typically the level of trust, the level of just overall employee engagement by the majority, who may be white males, is, at least in this country, is much higher. So there's an overarching positive sentiment and overarching positive outcomes for the business. And also, I think right now, as you said, with these brands, one of the things that was also reported as you were talking, I was reflecting on this, is that you can see the impact right now on these businesses. You can go and see that foot traffic at Walmart and Target is down by numbers that are impactful. And when you talk about 4 or 5%, even in the first weeks, maybe 8 or 10% even, that hits your bottom line. And then when you look at companies like Costco, they had an increase, the kind of to the same tune, about 4 or 5%, or even sometimes upwards of that in the first few days impact. And the number of membership applications and people putting that in to become members of Costco, for example, went up. So I think these are some evidence. You're looking at companies, ELF, for example, the cosmetic brand, they have had 24 consecutive quarters. It's kind of, they're one of, I think, only 6 companies, I think something like that, in publicly traded, companies that have posted such results, that, quarter over quarter revenue growth. And they've improved, their results by like 500%, or just 700% over the last 5 years, or 500% over the last 7 years. I forget, one of those two. But anyway, significant amount, in recent times, as they've come out and been very vocal, like that ad, they ran it last year, actually. So many dicks, So there's actually, if anybody doubts, some people tell me, oh yeah, I don't know about BCG or a Deloitte report or something, those are not applicable to me. I have a small, medium business, I know you know this, but for our audience too, most of our business, actually 3/4 of it, is with organizations with that are small, medium, and certainly less than 1,000, many of them less than 100 employees. And so we work day in and day out with SMBs. And we hear this from them, that some of these reports of positive impacts, or the business case for DEI, may not be applicable to them. But then you can see, from people actually coming out and talking about it, and then from their own results, what we have seen is these small, medium businesses that have many other things to do in life are year over year renewing their subscriptions to efforts like, some of the efforts that we have with them, which proves that they're seeing some result. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, especially now in the last few years, where since the pandemic and then, the inflation and all of these things going on, certainly they're not just doing it for anything else, but the results that they're actually seeing. So, so there's certainly a lot of evidence that we see. And then there is, I want to ask you about just, the workforce. I mean, you work with a lot of organizations. Clearly, those who work with you are applying it appropriately, and you're helping them do that. But what about their employees? I mean, what vantage point do you have to them, and how the employees are, asking for or not, or some might be disgruntled, because of some of these efforts. Do you have a good vantage point to that? That just came to me in real time to think, what do you see with the employees themselves? I mean, I know you talk a lot to the leaders, but also do you get a chance to talk to the employees?
Yes, I mean, a part of the process is that we survey employees, and then also do listening sessions. So we don't do focus groups. So we're not limited in who we identify. You get to come, you get to come. It's like, this is open to everyone. So our vantage point is that all employees have access. Those we work with, for companies, 600 people, if they want to drop us an email or share something, we're available. What I've experienced and heard, I guess, over the past a couple of months is fear. Is employees are very fearful of what does that mean for me, and how can I still do this work? So they're scared, they're concerned. Regardless of what community you relate to or you're connected to, it feels like something is being taken away, and it feels like that they've done something wrong. Some experience it in different ways more than others, but it's also, I think, the responsibility of leadership is to provide the support necessary. And so that's what we really try to do, is make sure leaders know that culture is still should be a priority of what you do each and every day. Engagement should be a priority of what you do each and every day. And that's not, I'm a law-abiding citizen. My husband, John Harvey, knows I will not go to jail for him. I will not go to jail for anybody. So I'm telling you, I'm like, we still obey the law, but we do it in a way that our focus is creating the spaces where there's psychological safety and where employees feel empowered to do their best work. And so helping organizations do that is really important, because it helps them maintain profitability and productivity in their workspaces. So I don't, we can't skirt around the impact that it has in some of our organizations, and we have to be intentional about providing the tools. You have EAPs, you have, that's another metric is, as an organization, are you seeing a spike in your benefits utilization because of the level of stress that someone is experiencing? Are they using maybe their mental health benefits? So you can tell when something different is going on, even if people are not saying it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to use those, benefits, encourage people to use it, and then to look at those metrics. You make a great point there. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about, I'm sure you do too, is just, what should we call it? Because actually a lot of these organizations, even the ones who have publicly said, I mean, we've heard now from a number, and I'm not going to name organizations now because I don't want to get them into trouble if they think that for some reason they had to be publicly, come out against DEI. But they actually have some of those efforts still going on. And a lot of organizations do. And so the majority of the organizations are just kind of, staying low and not saying what they're doing, right? But they're certainly continuing it. But they just wonder what they should call it. So we saw actually some data from Littler, which is very good data. They asked over 350 C-suite executives right before inauguration from mid-December to mid-January. They asked, how they refer, what's the D&I language that they use, and how do they refer to their efforts in that regard. And then about the same number of people, they asked them just like, a little bit later after inauguration, in the first week of February, basically from the 30th of January to the 7th of February. And I want to just quickly, again, share this data. I promise I will call this out for the audio audience. So here is the slide for pre-inauguration. So pre-inauguration, they had about 55% of the people said they refer to it as diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. The next biggest group was 11% said that they refer to it as, with adding belonging in there. So DEIB or just DIB. And after that, you have 9%, 8%, 5% with variations of that. Some people call it DEIA with accessibility in there, or IDEA. We've heard that commonly, of course. IDEA. So all variations of having the word accessibility in there. And then some people just maybe having a shorter version, just diversity and inclusion, DNI, for example. So this is the picture from, again, pre-inauguration. Okay, you ready for the post-inauguration?
I don't know.
So post-inauguration, this is a little bit of a more complex picture. They're showing kind of the percentages, and there's a lot of colors and things on this slide, but the bottom line of it is here in the bullets on the right-hand side. So here is a summary of how organizations have changed in how they refer to their DEI programs. 9% have eliminated or moved back, the word diversity. 22% added or moved up the word equity. And about 18% added or moved up belonging, and about 17% added or moved up inclusion. So diversity is out for some of them anyway, for small 9%. And then around 20% or so have added or moved up either the word equity or belonging or inclusion. How do you think of this? Does this surprise you? Is this consistent with what you have seen? What do you think about some of this data, Sandy?
Yes. So I think in its current state, and people, when we don't know what's going on in the midst of the chaos, the easiest thing to do is to take diversity away, because that seems to be what the issue is. But that's not the reality of the state that we live in. I like to look at whatever you call it. I have the understanding of, if you are fully embraced and immersed in an inclusive culture, you have done diversity right. You know what you're doing. It's a part of your systems. It's a part of your process. It's a part of what you do. But taking away diversity does not mean that diversity is gone. Diversity is more than just, race, age, gender. It's also birth order. It's all, I'm the only child. I'm the youngest child. It's where I grew up geographically. It's where we live, how we do work. You and I are on the opposite ends of the country. So there's a lot of pieces that when we talk about diversity in organizations, we still have to be intentional about doing that work, because there are some people that won't be able to have a fluid conversation with someone else because they don't understand the person, and they've not taken time to understand, and we're not providing the tools to understand the person. So removing diversity doesn't mean that it goes away. I guess that'll be my first point. And then I find that it's also interesting how you said that equity, belonging, and inclusion was either added or moved up. So hopefully that means that some organizations are, moving it to the forefront and being intentional about doing the work. Those that I work with are still doing the work. I've had a couple of organizations that have tweaked, what they call it, but they're still in the engagement and inclusion and access space. But I had that beforehand. I have clients who didn't use the word equity, but used the word access. So that's why I said language matters, because that's the whole beauty of diversity. We're not doing everything all the same way. And that should be okay. But I don't see a lot of changes around right now around inclusion. I don't work with a lot of government, contractors or the individuals that, have to worry about that. So, but I think it's important, and it's something that all of us need to be mindful of, because it's going to impact everybody right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do work with a number of customers. We work across 24 industries, and of course that includes some government, state and local government entities, nonprofits, and others that have grants, federal grants.
Mm-hmm.
And they're largely staying the course, as you say. the word that I hear the most in our work is people are opting for inclusion, because
Yes.
nobody can be in disagreement with inclusion.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people, we see that happening a lot. The word equity and belonging, I think we see here and there, but not as commonly as the word inclusion being added or moved up, or
Mhm.
or being just the main word that they use to refer to that. And I like what you said about diversity, because diversity, I don't even understand sometimes um, the debate around diversity, because it's a fact. It's not like we can debate a fact that you look at data, workforce data, and millennials and Gen Z are already majority diverse, and that means that they identify along one of the key parameters that are known as being diversity parameter: race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and so on. And they are going to be the majority of the workforce in a few short years. Their number is growing very fast. And so when you have a workforce that's majority diverse, it makes you wonder, what does that mean if you're going to now all of a sudden say, we are, we are stopping our programs, or, we're doing these things. So I think, that is something for companies to think about extremely seriously, because employee branding is one of the hardest types of branding to change. People have an emotional connection to these things. And once they see something that a company said, they're not just going to stop buying your stuff. They're not going to work for you. They're going to tell their friends not to work for you. So the best talent will not be available to
That's
you.
true. Yep.
So that is I think, a big risk, besides just the liability of potential lawsuits and so on. There's just the branding, the employer branding. You'd be very surprised how quickly, and especially in these days, when on social media and on, all kinds of ways, well, these things can really, like wildflower. I mean, I think I hear in some circles that Target is like, nobody will ever go to work for Target kind of thing right now. I mean, in some circles, people say that. And I'm not saying that's all the people, and obviously there's enough people in this country, they'll probably find some people, but are they going to be able to access the best talent when that kind of their name is tarnished in that way? We do have a question that I want to bring up here and see if we want to address it here. What do you think of the SHRM recommended language of BEAM, BEAM, and in the inclusion of merit in DEI work? I will say there's MEI has been also, we have heard that, right? So DEI, MEI, and to include merit, and of course the E stands for excellence, and so on. But and the person who submitted the question says, I have mixed feelings about how it's being defined, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Mhm. Oh gosh, and I'll keep them good thoughts, I promise. It's challenging because in most organizations currently, we do not have an equitable performance management process. Just in most, it's, I was talking with someone a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we still have to rank. We can only have 3 exceeds, and we can only have, I'm like, that is to me not based on merit. If someone technically exceeds and they did phenomenal work and went over and above, that's one piece. But looking at being I think it's belonging enhanced by access through merit. And also noting that SHRM a couple of years ago dropped diversity.
Yes,
So we
had a big backlash also.
yes, yes. So this is also the opportunity for HR professionals, and I, fall into this as well, even though I'm not currently practicing in a corporate organization, is that we have to really stand up for what's right. We've always been in the center and the heartbeat of organizations. I am a proponent of creating inclusive cultures. I am a proponent of, even when I think about merit, if you're looking at merit in its truest sense, it is applicable from the CEO to your frontline team member. So that is also what's considered to be inclusion, where in some organization this work fails is because we don't hold everyone accountable for this work, for this initiative, for these actions. It's, only this group, train the supervisors and the employees. We already know what's happening. Yes, but are we accountable to ensuring that we're creating spaces that are engaging and that are inclusive? So, going back to the question, I, in a politically correct fashion, don't always agree with what other associations necessarily say. I think we should be focused on doing the work in its truest sense and not creating the other opportunities to skirt around what it is that we really should be focused on. And so I love SHRM's civility code and what they've done, to help create and have conversations. But I would not adopt anything that is not beneficial for your organization, because it will confuse people that are in your company right now. So I wouldn't say pick up something because it sounds good or they've laid it out. You have to go back with the engagement and what's good that works in your organization. And in its truest forms, I can tell you that you probably have core values that are very meaningful, impactful, but are you holding people accountable to that? So in its basic sense, I'd like to share with people, I'm like, if you're not doing anything related to DE&I, if you go back to your core values, are you holding people accountable for the core values? Because usually trust is in there, usually teamwork is in there, usually respect is in there. All of these great words are in there. It's not the colors on the wall. It's not, words that you use. It's how you actually treat people. And if you're not holding people accountable for how they treat people, then you're not doing this work properly. And that's not even getting to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I mean, that's a beautiful answer. Thank you. I will only add I have two thoughts, right? That are really not more profound or anything. You answered it so well, Sandy, but I will say maybe different way of saying it. Two thoughts. Thought number one is, making sure that a definition of merit is clear. Right now, if you can clearly define it and it works for you and for your organization, by all means, use it. Use whatever works, like you said, like for your organization, right? But if someone has put themselves, for example, right? If I have two people come to, apply to me and they're equal, obviously DI has never been about giving anybody who's unqualified, a job just because of any diversity parameter. It's never been those of us who actually have been practicing this for real and seeing results. We've never ever done that, because if you do that, I mean, it's obvious that the performance of the company will suffer and nobody will stand for that in the long run. So it's an unsustainable strategy to do what people, I'm sure at times, have done. Actually, I'm not saying it's never been done, but it's kind of self-corrective, because the organization will suffer and they'll have to change their ways and realize that they've gone maybe too far, right? And inappropriately applied it. But I think that, when people come, so they're equally qualified, they come to apply, and then one of them has, has had a history of homelessness and has had to put themselves through college, and they show just a lot of grit and persistence through that, and they tell their story, that's the case. And then another one comes where that's not the case, right? I mean, no fault of their own. They just were, had the good fortune of not having such hardships. I mean, in your mind, then you can decide, so what is merit, right? I mean, when you come to that situation, I mean, the devil is in the details. When things are thrown around like this, right? It's easy just to add a word like that. But you know, is it really meaningful, right? So you got to be careful that you very carefully define that, right? Thought number two I have is exactly what you said, Sandy, and I'll just maybe highlight it and say it a little bit differently, is, are you going to confuse those? You know, are you going to just, because when you think of it, if somebody is against DEI, right? Either because, I mean, what problem are you trying to fix? This is what I always tell, you know, anyone, you know, within our own group, with our customers, with our partners, what's the problem you're trying to fix, right? So if the problem is because some people just don't like you having DEI, do you think that, you know, if you added merit in there, that would help appease them? You know, and if so, then what's the fallout on the other side, right? People who are for DEI, are you going to confuse them, right? So it's very important. These actions, you know, words matter more than ever, and actions have always mattered, and also matter now in terms of unintended consequences that can happen as a result of it, right? So I would be very mindful of these things. I think we have a follow-up to this in the Q&A.
And I just want to add one little piece. Merit works if you're already at the table. A part of our work around DE&I is making sure that we have people at the table. So you can have a, you know, merit-based program. That's good. If Sandy's already there, then I can participate. I have access to that merit-based programming. If I'm not there, or know nothing about it, or don't have access to it, merit means nothing to me. And so it's kind of like you said, the devil is in the details. It's how do you look at this work? I want to enrich organizations with diversity of thought, which means I have to find people that come from different places and spaces in order for us to create that innovation and that differing thoughts process that we have as well.
Yeah, 100%. So again, I will say this is one of the probably toughest times for HR, starting with the pandemic and through now. So my heart goes out to all of our audience, which you know, in large measure are HR leaders, and also to their colleagues who work with HR or maybe wear two hats, or maybe are CEOs. A large number of our audience are also CEOs, and they work with their HR leaders on this. My hat is off to all of you, and my heart goes out to you also. For it is, you know, it is really a time for, I think, for organizations to frankly grow in this dimension, right? Organizations for a long time have done two things. One is stay out of people's personal business or personal life, and two is stay out of political or social debates, you know, that happen in the zeitgeist of the nation. I will say that it is time that organizations figure out, and I'm not saying the same, you know, there's a right answer for everybody, but they need to at least have this conversation. And the conversation needs to happen in the boardroom. I mean, I've sat on boards for a long time. I know you sit on boards too, Sandy, and you know, from nonprofits all the way up to major public boards, I can say this: it is time that boards really talk about these things. You know, it can't just be management kind of hanging out there by themselves, right? And management, if they're not getting that input or guidance from their boards, they should bring it to boards and discuss that with them, because this is confusing times. And actually, we have a follow-up here in Q&A. One of our listeners is asking, in the spirit of navigating this disorder, we also have SHRM, the largest global HR association, referring to it as I&D, a rebranding that occurred last year because they knew this was coming. And now, using a new framework, BEAM, what is our North Star? These charts reflect the confusion. Yeah, I'll just say quickly, and Sandy, I know you can give a better answer too, is no question that this is all contributing to the confusion. I have a lot of respect for SHRM, what they've done, and for Johnny Taylor since he took on the organization. I will say that even the best organizations can sometimes, get confused and confuse themselves, right? This happens. I mean, organizations are made out of people, and we're all just humans and can fall prey to getting confused from time to time. I do think that some of this rebranding and then rebranding is only adding to the confusion at a time when I think leadership needs to help, as you said, Sandy, ease the uncertainty, kind of create an environment of a little bit of, portraying strength and confidence and not, not pushing under the rug that there's real issues to deal with, but that there is a steady hand dealing with these things, right? I happened to be at a talk by Ezra Klein last night, and the new book, Abundance, that they've read, that they've just put out with Derek Thompson. And I will say this, that there is a point made there that was a very good point for all people who are progressive and are actually champions and allies and supporters, right? There was a very good point made that, sometimes you just have to make tough calls and you can't make everybody happy. You have to do what is best for the mission, the organization as a whole. And so I think we fall prey sometimes. Some of the best people, they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Sometimes with the best intention to take everyone's inputs into consideration, we just confuse everybody so much, right? And I dare say I'm not trying to be controversial, but at all, but I think it's patriotic. It's being a good friend to tell people things. And I will say, I think for those of you who are wondering about SHRM, I think that's a little bit of what SHRM has fallen into in recent years. And it's for good reason, because the business model of membership organizations has been a little bit, upended in recent years. And to their credit, they've done good things, and we've enjoyed our partnership with them. So again, I'm not at all, I'm a huge supporter, but I will say it's a confusing time. It's natural to get confused sometimes. And it's good to have these debates and provide input and feedback to all of that. So Sandy, over to you. That's what
I think that you hit a lot of good points for me. I mean, I still have my SHRM membership, national and local, but it is a time where CEOs and C-suites and boards need to speak up against the injustice or confusion that may be taking place. The only thing you can worry about is what happens in your household. We can't take care of our neighbor's house, but when your leaders are confident of this is the work that we're doing, and explain this is why we're doing this work, this is why we're committed to inclusion, whatever you call it. When you can say that and also frame it in a way that you're not trying to be controversial, you're not trying to be against what you're supposed to be doing, but you just know what works for your organization. And I feel like as Americans, everyone has the opportunity and the right to operate their business in such a way that it brings whatever type of engagement and profitability that they need to have. But most organizations I know need people. And if you don't treat the people right, you're not going to have a business, and you won't have a business model.
You know what? I love you saying that. So many things I love about everything you've said today, as always, Sandy, because it starts with the people. Sometimes people ask, we've been even asked this, right? Well, you have to prioritize something. Should we prioritize customers or our employees? And I'm like, listen, you won't have any customers if you don't have good employees, right? It's an obvious question. You have to start with your employees. Those are the main key stakeholders of your organization. I don't care if you're hybrid, if you're tech, if you're, manufacturing and everything in between, or government or anything. At the end of the day, it is the quality of the people. The people are the ones that make mistakes, right? People are the ones that put you at risk. or that go out of their way and do things that are extraordinary for you. So the most important thing is to focus on your employees. If you treat them right, and if you listen to them. So one of the plug I want to put in in the last few minutes is, you talked about uncertainty. You talked about how we are all feel, a little bit concerned about what, the future, and for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is just, the stock market, the layoffs, the inflation, the tariffs, all kinds of things, right? And so at a time like this, how do you even know what people are thinking?
Mm.
How do you find out what the people are really thinking? And now people tell me we survey them. People hate surveys. Everybody hates surveys. We hate receiving them. We hate taking them. We hate the people who get them, also the HR, when they get them, then they hate coming up with what should we do about this, right? And hate is a strong emotion. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but obviously, it's a necessary evil, right? So how do we improve that experience? How do we ensure that we still do it? And how do we how do we do it in a way that people will tell us the truth? Because a lot of organizations would tell me, I serve them, they tell me these things, but then I have this opposite outcome, which isn't what the people said. And I'm like, well, does it surprise you that they have to put their login and a password and all this stuff? You tell them it's anonymous, but they got to do all that stuff. What if you had a way to actually ask them without asking them any of that stuff, right? I mean, there is, I will say, we have a tool for this, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm just saying the point is it's important to know, that that you have to listen to people more than ever. And then how are you listening to them, especially for those who have a lot of frontline employees and who, are trying to find out from them, because the frontline, it's the worst case. They don't even have computers most of the time. So you're emailing them, a survey, and then you're wondering why you get less than 10% participation, from the front line. Any thoughts on that? And how do people even find out what?
Yes, we need another hour, but
Oh, we can arrange that.
well, I mean, you said a lot of good things, and I think, from the perspective that we have, I don't have an issue with getting information from employees. So when I survey them, like you said, when you do the same, you get the feedback. It's what we do with the feedback, but it's also two things that I notice where there's areas of opportunity for improvement. One is communication. We need to go back to basic communication skills. We need to go back to asking questions, being curious, listening, and we also need to go back to a focus on trust. I share with clients, trust is an organizational currency. If you don't have it, it's going to cost you more money to operate your business. So if those are not priorities, if you don't have open, transparent, honest communication, and that it's cascaded truthfully down to every level, you have a problem. And if you don't have trust within your organization, you have a problem.
Yeah, 100%. That's really great. Great thing to focus on, as we talked in the last couple of minutes. Let me just briefly put up, by the way, this slide that has the activity code for this session. This is SHRM's recertification credits that you can get by having been on this live conversation. In the last couple of minutes, while we have this up too, Sandy, I do want to ask if you have for especially the leaders, CHROs, C-suite, CEOs, what do leaders need to know, right now? I mean, what is the one thing you would tell them to focus on right now as they, if they want to stay the course, but they want to retool their approach a little bit, and they already were convinced before we started this conversation, or through this conversation, they became more convinced. What is the one thing you would tell them just in the last minute or so?
Yeah. For me, I think it's important to know why you're doing this work and be committed to that, because that will guide, as you asked, you said, what are you trying to get to? What's your outcome that you're trying to get to? Knowing your purpose of why this work is so important, you'll continue to do it regardless of who's in office, regardless of, we water our grass. because it's the right thing to do and we want green grass. If you don't want green grass, then you won't water it. So I would say continue to do the work in such a way that's meaningful and focusing on creating that psychological safety and focusing on making sure that you are touching the people. I don't know whose responsibility it is in your organization, but you can't do this without inquiring and supporting the people that are really doing the work.
Thank you so much, Sandy. As always, I've learned so much. I've enjoyed it so much. I'm sure our audience has too. We are available. If you have other questions for Sandy, please send it to us. You can send it to me personally if you like. My first name is Sonya, Sonya, at OurOffice.io. So please feel free to send us, again, Sonya at OurOffice.io, and I will get your questions to Sandy. And we'll converse more after this if we need to. I think the most important thing, as Sandy said, is ask your employees, what they're doing, know why you're doing it, and then tell them why. Explain to people. People are smart. You can share with them why you're doing what you're doing. And I promise you, if you just take the time to focus on the why and then communicate it, you will do great things or continue to do great things. Thank you so much. Thank you for the nice comments that you're all putting in the chat, and we look forward to the next session. Thanks again. Bye-bye.